My lord, the queen is dead.
Chase your tail light. I'll be under your skin, letting you go for a while, then I'm taking you in.
Let's get down to business, shall we? I'm Shanspeare, and if you're new here, you're an associate I avoid eye contact with when I see you out in public. Don't wave at me.
I don't know you.
But if you're returning, you're my bestie and I would love to hang out sometime. But first, I want to tell you a story about my friend Cece. She's a little older than me and very beautiful. She's kind-hearted and always manages to calm me down in situations where I may feel overwhelmed because she just always knows what to say. We have this strong connection to the point where if we see someone do or say something silly, we can instantly find each other in a crowd to exchange a knowing look. We just get each other, you know? This friend of mine is very popular, a lot of people know her, and because of that, she's usually invited to all of these beautiful parties where she dances and sings and drinks with her other friends. It's usually a big harmonious gathering, with masks, of course. But lately, she's been telling me that she feels unappreciated by the people around her. Like Daisy in The Great Gatsby, she's surrounded by all of these beautiful, earth-shattering things, but deep down, something feels unloved within her. She feels left behind most of the time, treated like an afterthought. Recently, I threw a party for this friend and sent her an invite, but she never showed up. The party ended up being a disaster. A fight broke out, some people got their dignity crushed, and parts of it were very blurry. The next day, I invited her over to my place and I said, "Critical thinking, where were you, girl?"
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And she said she tried to get in, but people had the door barricaded. She knocked and screamed and knocked some more, but no one could hear her over the music. So I decided to have another party, and this time, critical thinking is going to be the guest of the hour, because some of y'all really need a meter. Every time I say something that you want to violently argue with, within reason, I want you to look at my mug. This mug represents critical thinking. I need you, as my besties and the random stragglers who have somehow floated in here, to understand that this is a critical thinking zone. Even if your brain starts smoking like Patrick when he experienced one singular thought that one time, you need to keep looking at this mug. Okay? I just waxed poetic about the concept of critical thinking because last weekend I had a very interesting situation happen between another creator and myself. As the returning besties may know, I posted a video called "Cringe Culture is Just Bullying Persevering," of which the title and thumbnail have since changed. This video was suggested to me numerous times on my community post asking for video ideas, as well as in my fanfic culture video, since the topics go in tandem with one another, and I'm known for not caring about what cringy things I admit to doing. Voldemort fanfiction. So I posted the video, camped out in the comments, interacted with you guys as usual, and began to notice a weird trend. People kept commenting the name of another creator, who I will not name drop for their own privacy, as well as the sheer futility of doing so. And these commenters kept saying, "Why are you covering this topic when this creator already posted a video on it?" Or commentary channels just post the same things over and over again. And my personal favorite,
"Wow, this topic must really be popular for you and this creator to be posting a video on it."
Which are all statements that rarely get said to anyone outside of commentary, but whatever, let's move on. Needless to say, I was confused. I've never watched a video by this creator before, but I have seen her past video about TikTok trends being recommended to me, which again, I never got around to watching. This weird and unwarranted onslaught of comments came to a climax a few hours later when the creator posted on their Instagram story about the situation. I won't share the image with you all because it has the creator's face in it, and the creator and I already discussed it, so again, futile. But I will say, just for context, it was an inflammatory message about how I essentially copied this topic from them without credit and how they would never do what I did, but I'm just not built like them, I guess. With Copycat by Billie Eilish playing in the background for added layers, which is a song about being the original version of something while someone else is trying to be your clone. Now, if I am allowed to be honest here, it felt like I was transported back to the 9th grade with this one. It was potent. Okay, a direct shift. I was severely bullied in the 9th grade and throughout most of my high school years, but the 9th grade was the most concentrated of it. I had just moved to a new county, hadn't had a chance to make friends yet, and the group of girls I thought were my friends began publicly humiliating me almost every day. That's not a cry for sympathy or attention, which is a topic to cover a different day. It's just a correlation I made in my mind at the time, which I'm allowed to feel, and I would like to see anyone tell me otherwise. So that happened. I want to emphasize that there are no hard feelings on my side for the creator. I think they are very obviously talented and great at what they do, and I think there is a vibrant passion behind their work, which I got to see once I watched their cringe culture video at the height of the brief drama. I genuinely wish I was introduced to their content in a drastically different way, because they are very cool. So I took a few days off and I realized that I'm not as upset about the situation as I am confused, which is not an anomaly on the internet. Everything confuses me here. But I do think the situation could have been handled more professionally, especially since the creator has a larger platform than mine, and posting inflammatory things about me to that large platform without talking to me first, or I'm assuming even watching my video to see how drastically different we approach the topic, is irresponsible as a content creator of that size, because it can lead to harassment and bullying. I'm not saying that from a holier than thou standpoint. I think we're all susceptible to this. I've probably inadvertently done this myself, especially as a video essayist / commentary channel. We run the risk of being negligent and causing harm, either out of anger or simple failure to protect other people's identity. But I think we can work through the confusion I have regarding this situation together and use this as a stepping stone to an even broader conversation. I'm sure you've heard of Miss Olivia Rodrigo and the good Lord herself making headlines for plagiarism accusations, which, trust me, we will get to that. Let's zoom in a bit on this whole commentary fiasco and the concept of originality, which, doesn't look too good actually. Someone better check on her. That bitch is casket ready. T.S. Eliot once said, "One of the surest tests of the superiority or inferiority of a poet is the way in which a poet borrows. Immature poets imitate, mature poets steal. Bad poets deface what they take, and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different. The good poet welds his theft into a whole of feeling, which is unique, utterly different than that from which it is torn. The bad poet throws it into something which has no cohesion. A good poet will usually borrow from authors remote in time, or alien in language, or diverse in interest." End quote. My man Eliot kicked the bucket in 1965, arguably at the peak of the civil rights movement, because, karma's a bitch. But we can trace these same sentiments of good art being conglomerations of other art back even further than him. Steal Like an Artist is a book written by Austin Kleon that Forbes describes as, quote, equal parts manifesto and how-to. It aims to introduce readers to the idea that all creative work is iterative. No idea is original, and all creators and their outputs are a sum of inspirations and heroes, end quote. Within this book, Kleon features quotes from various artists that all trace back to the idea of unoriginality being inevitable in art. He features a David Bowie quote that goes, "The only art I'll ever study is stuff that I can steal from." The musician Questlove said, "The only mofos in my circle are people that I can learn from." And Yohei Yamamoto follows up with, "Start copying what you love. Copy, 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 copy. At the end of the copy, you will find yourself." Even all the way back to the Bible, originality is silenced by the quote, "There is nothing new under the sun." In short, Austin Kleon seeks to disrupt our preconceived notion of originality, which, according to dictionary.com, is defined as, quote, belonging or pertaining to the origin of something, aka being the first to do something. He firmly asserts that originality does not exist in the pure form we expect it to, meaning it's very rare for someone to be the first to do something without using the influences of others. Of course, he uses words like theft and copy to get his point across, but what he's suggesting isn't plagiarism, but instead practice. Plagiarism, he says, is trying to pass someone else's work off as your own. Copying, however, is about reverse engineering. It's like a mechanic taking apart a car to see how it works. Hi, it's me, the three horsemen of the apocalypse, bonnet, pajamas, and video quality that looks like it was taken on a 13th century spoon. I feel like I didn't explain my views on great artists still enough. I think there's a difference between plagiarism, inspiration, and the situation that happened with me and the other creator. If there's ever been a time for that critical thinking to tap in, it's now. Let her in. Just in case though, plagiarism isn't acceptable, period. But this video isn't about plagiarism, it's about inspiration, influence, and simultaneous creations void of direct influences being treated like plagiarism. So, keep that thinking cap on, or so help me God. This form of reverse engineering is how most inventions come into fruition. The telescope by Galileo was influenced by a Dutch man named Hans Lippershey, who had already been creating magnifying devices prior to Galileo, who allegedly heard about the practice and decided to create his own. James Watt is credited with inventing the steam engine, even though two people are known to have invented it prior. But Watt's own creation made the process far more easy than its predecessors, so he takes the cake. And technically, elevators have existed since ancient Egypt, but Alicia Otis is credited with the modern invention that incorporated a safety brake so that riders wouldn't fall to their death if the rope used to pull them up snapped during transit. Throughout history, even the greatest of men have stood on the shoulders of giants, a phrase which, according to phrasefinder.com, means to use the understanding of those before us to cultivate new intellectual progress. Bernard of Chartres said that, so did Isaac Newton and Diego de Estella and Marin Mersenne, and Blaise Pascal, George Herbert, Samuel Coleridge, and was opposed by Friedrich Nietzsche in an attempt to say true progress comes from giants among men rather than the men who stand on their shoulders, which was an idea he got from someone else. That's not to say originality doesn't exist. I just think that it doesn't exist in the way everyone wants it to. Emily Vanderwerf, author of Dear Olivia Rodrigo, Ignore the Internet, Originality is Overrated, explains this in immaculate detail by describing the history of various art forms from music to literature and showing how the very fabrics of pop culture and historical culture are all influenced from something else. She states that certainly there are wildly original artists, including some who invent new genres or types of art. Even still, they often tend to deconstruct or blend art in ways that haven't been thought of before, which is to say they're just recombining art in new ways, not completely inventing new forms. Shakespeare, a writer whose work contributed endless numbers of new words and phrases to the English language, largely told stories he appropriated from other sources. From propagandistic historical accounts designed to assuage the royalty of his era, to plays with roots in lots of other countries, and sources. Picasso's invention of cubism, she goes on to say, introduced a seismically new way of looking at the world, but it wouldn't exist if he didn't already know as much as he did about creating art in a more traditional way, end quote. And you can't forget about multiple discovery, a hypothesis Rory Booth explains in their 2018 article by the same name. Multiple discovery is yet another nail in the coffin of originality because it shows that similar ideas can exist within more than one person outside of being influenced by one another. Booth states, essentially, multiple discovery is the hypothesis that most scientific breakthroughs are made more or less independently and simultaneously by multiple researchers. This phenomenon is noted best by the simultaneous invention of calculus by Sir Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz? This phenomenon is noted best by the simultaneous invention of calculus by Sir Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz, the development of identical theories of natural selection by Charles Darwin and Arthur Russell Wallace, and as Emily Vanderwerf notes in the article from earlier, the simultaneous invention of cubism by both Picasso and the French artist Georges Braque. Even though I'm sure all of these inventors all thought they were creating something original or fresh, they were all more or less working on the same things separate from one another. Some inventions that were simultaneously created were even made by people who had never met, who were separated by language, lifestyle, time, and continents. This leads me to believe that the idea of pure originality, of doing something first and independent of other influences, as we know it, is dead. And it's probably been dead since the dawn of time. That raises the question, what do we do with this false promise of originality? Do we finally see the fragile structure it stands on? Do we allow ourselves to think critically about simultaneous occurrences in art? Or do we go with the least helpful choice, which is infighting? If it were me, I would go with, oh, we're going with infighting? Damn it. Commentary is a beautiful world. We have artists of every walk of life giving their special touch to a wide variety of topics. Those topics, as one of the comments on my cringe culture video put so eloquently, tends to overlap every now and again to the point that it feels like we just talk about the same things. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional, and just about 90% of the time, it's not that big of a deal. YouTube has been around since 2005, and according to Statistica.com, there were at least 2 billion users on YouTube in 2020. In May of 2019 alone, 500 hours of video was uploaded to YouTube every single minute. I've heard of misplaced confidence before, but you are simply built different. If you think your content or your favorite creator's content is the only video on the platform with an original topic, out of 2 billion users, out of 500 hours of footage per minute alone, out of nearly 2 decades of YouTube existence? Come on, look at the mug. Put your critical thinking cap on, babe. Just to use my own situation as example, to say I copied someone or should cite someone because I covered a topic similar to theirs when I have never watched their video or never used any information from their video as a source is like saying a student who wrote a paper on the same topic as another student in a classroom of 2 billion is copying that student, even if they have never met in their life. Not only is that the worst class size ever concocted, prayers up to the professor who has to grade all of those papers, but it's just not realistic.
It's just not realistic.
A professor isn't going to come up to me and say,
Why didn't you cite this student's paper as a source in your own paper?
because I would be like,
I didn't read their paper, so I can't use it as a source.
and by the logic of the comments I got, the professor would then say,
But I read their paper, and it's the same topic as yours, and they submitted theirs first. And even though the way you two cover the topic is drastically different, it's still the same topic, so you are a copycat, Miss Shanspeare.
of course it's not the creator's fault or their audience's fault that they don't know what videos I watched in preparation for that video, which is none. by the way. They aren't looking over my shoulder as I log into youtube.com. They don't know my history is just cat spa day ASMR, mukbangs, friends I have in the commentary community, and random 12-second clips from various shows for meme value. But even without that knowledge, critical thinking should kick in somewhere along the line, and people should be able to understand that cringe culture and its relation to bullying has been covered numerous times before me, before the creator involved, and even long before that. If I have to cite that creator has to cite this video that was posted a week before theirs, and this one, and all of those creators have to cite all of these creators because they posted after them on a similar topic as well. And all of those creators in turn have to cite all of the academic journals and articles that probably came out before their video as well, or else they're plagiarizing. Even if they never read those sources or watched any of those videos, or even if they don't know those other sources exist. If we define plagiarism as simply covering a saturated topic while not being the first one to cover it, the academic world is going to be a mess. In fact, I need to go call my old advisor right now and ask why she wrote about applying various theories to literary texts because, other people already did that before her. Hello?
God?
Yes, I would like to report a crime. There is some overlap in the topic. For instance, we both mention America's Funniest Home Videos, and we both talk about our own experiences with cringe culture. But I do think those are very organic thoughts that most people would come to when structuring a video essay about cringe culture. I mean, it's not a thesis, it's almost kindergarten level information that anyone would include. I do believe in mentioning other creators, especially if I gained even the slightest bit of information from their videos for my own content, because that's how citation works. I have mentioned creators before in cases where I was directly influenced by their work, like Madison Brown's video on teen promiscuity for my Extinction of the Tween Demographic video, or when a video I write is directly related to something I know has been done before by creators on the platform, like Khadijah, Amanda, and T. Noir's article I used for my Disappearance of the Individual Black Woman video. I've even briefly mentioned creators that didn't directly relate to my video's topic, so long as I thought their video paired well with or fleshed out a joke a little better, like I've done for Yara Zaid's Hunger Games video. I cite every academic source I use in my videos and my description for further reading, so no one can ever assume quotes or ideas I'm pulling from outside sources are my own, to imply, like that creator and their audience did, that I'm someone who doesn't give credit where credit is due is simply untrue. It's disrespectful and lazy. So yes, the commentary community may overlap in topics, but that's not all there is to it. I think the true beauty of the commentary community is how versatile in voice it is. We learned about writer's voice a lot in college, primarily in my English courses and creative writing courses. A writer's voice, according to the New York Times, refers to the, quote, way an author's personality comes through on the page, via everything from word choice and sentence structure to tone and punctuation, end quote. In short, it's an artist's signature on their work, which is something that, even in a world lacking pure originality, varies from person to person. I've mentioned this in the past, but when I first started creating video essays, they were inspired by the likes of Broey Deschanel and Yara Zaid, especially in terms of editing. I loved their seamless transitions and gentle yet poetic delivery. I'm sure if you look closely, some of the elements of my channel may reflect that inspiration. But the best part is, I don't think it's possible to watch a video by Broey Deschanel and then watch a video by me and think they're created by the same person. I stood on the shoulder of a giant and saw new horizons that I could call my own. Even if 8,000 people flocked to that horizon they saw on the shoulder of their own giant, the piece I have is still my own. There will always be something special about the art I create because I created it, and that makes it unique. feel like my story doesn't matter. My writing, my voice in the writing field does not matter because there's so many stories out there. But then I have to remind myself, no one tells a story like me. I could tell the same, I could rewrite Harry Potter. I won't, I should, but I won't. I could rewrite Harry Potter. It would be a totally different story because I write totally different from anyone else, and everyone else writes totally different from each other. Every time I feel like my voice doesn't matter, I have to realize that it does, even if I'm telling the same exact story, because no one tells my story like I tell my story, and no one tells my story because it is my story. I think Louise Bing, author of Originality is Dead, definitely backs me up on that. They state, Thomas Higginson said originality is simply a pair of fresh eyes. So if something is new to the viewer or creates something new within them, it holds some form of originality. Equally, if we ourselves invest something autonomously yet the same has been elsewhere, this does not render the process we went through or the fact that we made it unoriginal. If originality is considered as a relative concept, then it can never die, end quote. Emily Vanderwerf, too, states, my advice would be not to look for originality of content, but originality of voice. Don't approach art as something you passively consume. Approach it as the start of a conversation. What speaks to you in a work? What do you connect with? What conversation is the art having with you, with other works of art, end quote. If we look at originality as this pure form of creation where the only contribution is that it was done first, we will lose so much creativity in this world. We will lose just about all of Shakespeare's work and subsequently all of the phrases and words he introduced to the English language. Good luck saying all that glitters is not gold or laughing stock or wild goose chase without my man Shanspeare. We would lose most inventions that were evolved from previous creations, like the light bulb or the television or the radio. We would lose Twilight, because a book about vampires already exists. We would lose fan fiction, Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno, different styles of staples like cars, clothes, houses, and etc. We would lose our various forms of social media because Friendster already existed, so we don't need MySpace and in turn, Facebook. Okay, maybe y'all are onto something. We wouldn't have Instagram or Twitter, and we would lose so much music. And if I had to miss out on Sour because you assholes don't know what interpolation is, I would be pissed. The world clearly knew something big was to come of her when Olivia Rodrigo released Driver's License in January of 2021, but it had no idea just how big she would become. The debut single by the previously non-mainstream artist broke just about every record you could think of. In its first 3 days, the song received 21 million streams, according to Billboard. On its fourth day, it broke Spotify's record for most single-day streams for a non-holiday song. In 1 week, it amassed over 65 million streams, breaking Spotify and Amazon Music records. To put it simply, Olivia Rodrigo cemented herself as that bitch. You know what Beyonce said about being that bitch. You cause a whole lot of conversation. In a perfect world, Olivia Rodrigo's success would be attributed to her own pure originality. Maybe she invented a whole new genre, a whole new structure of songwriting, a whole new way to cry in your bedroom over something you've never experienced. But from the start, Driver's License was heavily compared to Taylor Swift and Lorde. Olivia Rodrigo is very open about who inspires her. She stands on the shoulders of those giants with a big picket sign that has their name on it, surrounded by hearts and flashing lights. The list ranges from Taylor Swift to Cardi B, and even underground artists like Gracie Abrams, a lo-fi artist whom Rodrigo named as the inspiration for Driver's License musical style. But simply naming influence wasn't enough for most people. When Deja Vu, the second single from her album, released in April of this year, the comparisons pressed in even closer, turning into accusations, as people said the song sounded suspiciously like Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift. The suspicion all came to a head in May 2021 when Good For You dropped and the world pressed its ear against the speaker, drawing back in confusion and surprise as they all heard the melody of Misery Business coming in through Olivia's performance. The angsty pop-punk flavor of the two songs even mashed up harmoniously in a viral video by Ada Music, which had commentators flicking a little bulb over their heads and declaring that yes, Olivia Rodrigo did copy the 2007 smash hit from Paramore. But did she? I think Adam Neely did an amazing job breaking down the similarities between Good For You and Misery Business, as well as analyzing just why people find a connection between the two different songs. I highly recommend you go watch that for a much better explanation from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. But if you just want to hear the poorly paraphrased version right now, Neely essentially states that the two songs have the same chord progression. Quote, the melodies have the same style of syncopation, as well as, quote, similar lyrical themes. But Neely goes on to say that despite these glaring similarities, the musical style of Misery Business does not wholly belong to Misery Business, meaning it's not as original as everyone is implying. Neely explains that Paramore uses an axis progression for Misery Business, aka the 4 chords of pop music, but they choose to start on the 4 chord instead of the usual arrangement. In fact, 1.7% of songs on the Hot 100 charts from 1990 to 2016 used this same chord progression. Neely goes on to do the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, which is comparing Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day to Good For You, because they also have similar structures, and Never Ever Getting Back Together by Taylor Swift to Misery Business, because they do as well. You may not hear it separately because, as Neely notes, different people are singing it, perhaps in different tone and tempo. But Misery Business and Never Ever Getting Back Together mesh freakishly well because they are structured in similar ways. Neely states, there are only so many chord progressions and diatonic melodies which might work with those progressions, and certain progressions have places where notes/tones want to naturally fall into. Not to mention that ears are a sensitive organ because they only like certain arrangements. Therefore, only a certain number of melodies can realistically exist within music, especially if you consider that there are only 12 chords. I think the same argument can be applied to Lorde's newest album, Solar Power, which has been heavily compared to Lana Del Rey. I do agree that Lana Del Rey is a trailblazer that contributed a lot to music and effectively paved over the musical landscape of today, which allows artists like Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, Halsey, Taylor Swift, and yes, even Lorde to walk through comfortably. Argue with your mama, not me. I don't necessarily think Lana owns high-pitched singing and guitar plucks, which is one thing a lot of people are using to accuse Lorde of copying. But I'm also a graduated English major whose only claim to understanding music is knowing that if I want to shake my ass, it's a good song. Solar Power has a strong 60s influence with gluttonous poetic verses, witchery, and mysticism. Whether that be portrayed satirically or genuinely, who's to say? And I can definitely see how people would immediately view all of those elements as key pieces for a Lana Del Rey reject album, but I do think the album has the potential to stand on its own if people would let the chains loose a little bit. It all goes back to that artistic voice for me. Lana's songs are wholly digestible, flow as expected, and are almost predictable at this point in her career, which isn't a bad thing, it just means she has found her sound. Lorde, on the other hand, has always been an artist that you have to listen to more than once, because her approach to her music is a little unconventional sometimes. You expect her to rhyme here, but she doesn't. You expect her to keep going with that deep, murky voice of hers, but she decides to record an entire album in a higher pitch. And then you expect there to be a consistent high pitch because of that, but then she throws in a random and albeit scary deep tone. And we see that unconventional storytelling and delivery in past albums as well. That is what originality is to me. Or maybe it's just authenticity. You can have your influences and you should definitely cite them, but somewhere along the way, I promise, you become your own force to be reckoned with. If we try to purify the concept of originality into something it just won't be in an artistic world, we won't have much art left to create. As Neely notes, what if great artists can no longer steal? Will there be any more great artists? If ownership is treated so preciously, we won't have any scaffolding on top of which to build. If we are the sum of our influences and can no longer add them together, what do we have left? End quote. If the only impactful thing about your art is that it was simply done first, you need to start making better art. Originality is dead, babe. Close the fucking casket.